On today's Prairie Sportsman, we visit with Delta Waterfowl to learn about efforts to aid duck populations through the installation of hen houses.
I have said I'm going to do my part to make more ducks.
Then, we check in on 2 different insect surveys in progress at the University of Minnesota Department of Entomology. One of a very helpful species.
The way bumblebees pollinate is really special. We call it buzz pollination.
The other, harmful.
When you think about ticks, it's not something a lot of people want to talk about, right? Ticks are kind of gross.
Welcome to Prairie Sportsman. I'm Bret Amundson. This show is all about Minnesota's outdoor opportunities and the science and management behind those opportunities. Got another great show for you starting right now.
Funding for Prairie Sportsman is provided by the Minnesota Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund, as recommended by the Legislative Citizen Commission on Minnesota Resources. By Mark and Margaret Yakel-Julien on behalf of Shalom Hill Farm, a retreat and conference center in a prairie setting near Windham, Minnesota. On the web at shalomhillfarm.org. And by the Friends of Prairie Sportsman. To become a friend of Prairie Sportsman, visit pioneer.org/Prairie Sportsman.
Welcome to Prairie Sportsman. I'm Bret Amundson. Well, what does the future of waterfowling look like? Well, for one group of dedicated conservationists, it means skies full of waterfowl and blinds full of happy hunters. And today we're going to find out the hard work they're doing to help make sure that happens.
I'm the chairman of our Delta Waterfowl group in St. Michael, Minnesota. Been the chairman for about 14 years. Our group this is our 18th year of being together. Ever since that day I came on as a committee member, I have said I'm going to do my part to make more ducks and produce more ducks. When Delta first came up with the idea of putting hen houses out, and we saw some of the research from some of the biologists and the studies that they had been doing and what the numbers were coming back at us as hunters saying that this is putting more ducks out there, that kind of got me the head to the fire to get that fire burning in me. And I took that fire and brought it to the group and said, we need to start doing this. And the guys jumped on board and they've been going with it ever since.
A drill, I think, and then the cradle.
All right, so Lance, the plan is that you're going to kind of surround this body of water here with hen houses and wood duck boxes.
Yeah, so putting the hen house out right now, we feel that this is going to be a good spot.
Why do you pick this spot?
With a little bit bigger water, we don't want the ice to take out the hen house, but at the same time, we want to be in an area where we feel that there's going to be some birds that are going to use this area. And really, we want them to come into the area and hopefully see it and say, I'm nesting there.
So now that we got a spot picked out, you got a crew of guys walking out there, what's the next step?
So right now, their job is to get out there. We try to put the post down into the water in the muck about 3 to 4 feet.
So first thing they're doing, they're drilling through the ice.
Yep, augering down through the ice. Try to get it away from the cattails, anywhere from 5 to 7 feet away. Augering a hole in, putting it in, and then we'll try to get it into the muck, like I said, 3 to 4 feet into the mud. We want the pole off of the ice anywhere from 2 to 3 feet, because then the hen structure or the house itself sits above the water that 3 to 4 feet. During call it the summer months, the predators shouldn't be able to get to them when they're out in the water.
And that's the whole point of putting them out over the water like this, of course, because these birds would normally be nesting in the grass, sometimes a little ways away from the water. You get that post in the ground down into that muck, and then what's after that?
After we've got that situated, feel like it's a good base, what we'll do is we'll take the cradle, which we have pre-welded together, and put that in, and we'll usually drill 2 pilot holes into them to hold that secure.
And then you actually try to point them in a certain direction.
We do.
North is there.
We try to stay away from the northwest wind to go right through the tube. We try to put them on offset them a little bit. Once that cradle is secure and we feel good, put the hen house in there, and then we zip tie them with metal, not just plastic, but with metal, so that it's wind will come. You know, these prairie areas, 30, 40 mile an hour winds won't push that off into the water. Once we've got that down, we put a little nesting grass in there for her to come in, and hopefully she'll bed it down, put a little pocket about the size of our fist, and hopefully she'll have some eggs, and we got some mallards down the way. The biggest thing that we have found, and that biologists, whether it be any out there projects that they're doing, those biologists have said we gotta keep the raccoons and the skunks and all those things, those predators, and having that hen house in that tube on water, it's given her a chance. I think we should put a wood duck house right up here.
Okay.
Because it looks like there's some flat ground there where we'll get it in there.
Okay. In the water, or?
We'll try to get it up on land if we can.
You don't really need a whole lot of gear. I mean, an auger, an ice chisel, and a couple of wrenches.
A drill.
And a drill is about all you really need.
As much as people think it is a lot of work, the spearheading of just getting the guys is the hardest part. Finding the resources and finding the materials isn't hard in this day and age with the internet and all of that stuff. And it doesn't take a lot of money, but if you get the guys that can support it, it doesn't take much.
We all look forward to doing it, and it's basically like duck camp without being able to shoot any ducks. That's basically it. And
we have a lot of fun. We laugh, we joke.
All right, so you put up some hen houses around this waterfowl production area. You're also doing some wood duck boxes.
Yeah, our group years ago was primarily putting wood duck houses up, and when the hen houses came in, then we started doing a combination of about half and half, and we really like the wood duck house thing. We think it's a beneficial deal.
So same kind of deal, they're gonna put this pole in, but they're putting it in actually on the ground, not in the water.
Yeah, we try to get it close to the water, but again, yeah, we get it right up tight. We try to get it close to the water so they can jump off, get in the water as quick as they can, those little ones. These are pretty quick installation for us.
You know you're doing something good for the birds. I've been mentored as a young person hunting and fishing, and it's good to do this when you get older when you can.
It just ups the nesting success so much from nature. I mean, they got a rough road out there with all the predators, raccoons, mink, skunks. It just makes the nesting success, makes it a little bit easier for them.
About the only metric you can use to quantify any success is when you look in those tubes and you see broken eggshells.
Absolutely. After putting out all the hen houses and the wood duck boxes and the hen houses, our last day we usually take, and that's kind of our day where we, as a group, go out and we kind of wait and we get to that house or we get to that wood duck house and we open it, and when you've seen the shells or you've seen the little nest in the hen house, I mean, all of us kind of get a little kid in us and jump up and down a little bit, and it makes us feel good.
Well, how's it look?
This one's been used. It's got
nice
eggshells in it. I don't see any feathers in there, but there are eggshells. And there's the imprint in the middle, so it's been used. Duck head sitting there.
So from what we have out here in western Minnesota, our success rate on our wood duck houses, I can confidently say that we are 90% or better on our wood duck houses. Our hen houses were probably more of like that 40 to 50%, which has been awesome for us.
What impacts have you seen from those efforts?
I think we're seeing more ducks. It's tough to always tell because of so many different variables, you know, but I do believe we're doing what's right, and I do believe we're seeing more. Seeing the birds come back at this time and the numbers of birds, and knowing that we're putting the hen houses and the wood duck houses out there to hopefully give them a chance of survival for the future, it doesn't get better.
If I have a good time series of a species, I can see where they occur throughout time. It allows us to create targeted conservation strategies for each different organism.
Ticks carry zoonotic diseases, so it's very important for humans, for pets, and also for our wildlife to know what's out there.
University of Minnesota researchers are on the hunt for some very important insects.
Bumblebees, I like them because they're big and fuzzy and easy to find and identify. We're mostly here just to see what's out here, kind of look for what species are here, look for rare species, anything interesting. They're very docile. They'll really only sting you if you grab them or if you're poking around their nest. But for the most part, you can go up to flowers, get really close, and they don't even care.
The way bumblebees pollinate is really special. We call it buzz pollination. There are some flowers where the pollen is not outside, that actually have a capsulate. And the way bumblebees pollinate those flowers is they will attach to that flower and they'll start vibrating or shaking the whole body and making this sound, this bzz, buzz sound. And what they're doing is just shaking the flower and getting all that pollen out. Honeybees can't do that. And, bumblebees are just big, fussy, prettier.
But these big, fuzzy, pretty insects face an immense array of challenges, as the number of native bumblebees in Minnesota is declining.
Technically, there are 25 species recorded from the state, but currently there's only 22 because one is extinct and 2 are extirpated. They exist, but not in Minnesota anymore. There's a lot of reasons: habitat loss, pesticides, climate change. For the bumblebees especially, a disease came through and wiped out a few species, and that happened in the mid or late 1990s.
The University of Minnesota Bee Lab is using a data-driven approach to help these threatened creatures.
First of all, we are going to the field, making surveys to see what's out there. You can't know what you lose if you don't know what you have. But most importantly, we rely on this historical collection of insects that we have. We are georeferencing, so basically all of these insects come attached with information of where they were collected and when they were collected. With those historical data, we can now compare, hey, if 100 years ago I was in this place, I can go here and find out what bumblebees I found. I can go out today and see which ones I can find now. But more important is, if I have a good time series of a species, I can see where they occur throughout time. That information is very important because it allows us to create targeted conservation strategies for each different organism.
Over the years, the process of collecting this data has become friendlier to the bee, which is especially important as Minnesota is one of the few places on the planet where one can find the federally endangered rusty patch bumblebee.
Before, in order to have evidence that a species occurred in a place, we'll collect them, we'll preserve them, and it'll end up in a slide right here. Now, we have accumulated enough knowledge in bumblebees where now we can try to do monitoring efforts that are what we call non-lethal, so we don't need to kill a specimen. So we can go out to the field, take the data, place, the date, and who collected it, write that data, take a picture, and now that picture becomes a specimen.
Researchers are working to expand their catalog to include specific DNA data of Minnesota bees.
We're trying to find pieces of the DNA where we see variability within the species. It's very low, but it's different enough from other species. Now, there are regions on the genome that we can do that, and it's been going on for some time now. We've called this the barcode of life. Because it's the analogy, right? That a sequence of DNA, so letters A, T, G, and C, that's what DNA is made out of. It can basically tell me what a species is if I knew where it came from. So we're creating that barcode database. But there is a very important difference that we need to do with those barcodes. A box of my favorite cereal here is gonna have probably the same barcode as in my home country in Guatemala. So that database is just gonna be very stable. Now, we wish life was that easy, but because this DNA has evolved through time, there's variability that happens within those. What we're doing here is we're increasing the amount of specimen information from Minnesota. So if people want to do research in Minnesota, have a way to compare genetic information of Minnesota species. And we're not relying on information from other places.
Thanks in part to the genetic database that Christian's team is currently building, the future of population monitoring will leave physical specimens out of the equation entirely, turning instead to a forensic investigation of the scene.
Just like now we can go out and take a picture of a bumblebee and know what that bumblebee is, just because we have thousands of specimens that we've already compared. When we build these genetic databases, every insect that has stepped here has left some print. That print has DNA. So imagine a place where I can go to a flower. I can just take a swab on the flower or a piece of that flower, extract the DNA or all the signatures, that things that were there left. But our vision is being able to ask who was here. And we don't need direct evidence, or at least in the form of specimens.
Regardless of the advances in methodology, researchers say knowing what is happening to the bumblebees can be critical to understanding much larger trends.
There have been something that we call the insect apocalypse. And one of the things that scientists have observed is that the number of those insects are reducing. So the reason we're trying to see what happened with bumblebees, especially here in Minnesota, is because we have a robust enough data set in the form of specimens and history that we can actually measure that decline and put a number on that. Now, there is millions of species out there, and we don't have the luxury of having that data from everything else. So the name of the research of this project is Overcoming Insect Decline, Bumblebees to the Rescue. And the way bumblebees are rescuing us is allowing us to understand and sort of served as an example of what could happen with many things that we don't even know yet exist.
One thing the researchers are grateful for is the general public's interest in the plight of these pollinators.
You see a lot these days, people wanting to plant pollinator gardens and do other things to help the bees. And that stuff, it makes a difference, you know, especially in urban and suburban areas where there aren't necessarily a lot of good flow of resources. Like having a pollinator garden can actually do a lot to support bees and bumblebees.
Insects, pollinators, they know how to do their job if we just provide them jobs by creating places where they can go, gather, feed. As simple as saying, I'm gonna plant some pretty flowers in my garden, preferably if they're native, or I'm gonna plant some tomatoes so I have what to eat and my pollinators have something to eat.
On the topic of conservation, Christian has some parting thoughts on the underlying reason why good stewardship of the environment is so important to us all.
Nature is out there and it just occurs. We are part of it, and it sustained our lifestyle. What's happening right now is that we are accelerating the loss of that ecosystem. I had one teacher that told me one time, conservation has one objective, conservation of humankind. Bumblebees are probably outlived us. Insects are definitely gonna outlive us as humans. Life is resilient. It has gone through glaciations, through a meteorite, through several extinctions. So a lot of these conservation efforts are also for us, and we can be here longer sharing this planet.
And that sure would be nice. No one likes a tick. Sorry, Patrick Warburton.
Awkward moment.
These arachnids are a familiar foe to people enjoying the outdoors, but we know relatively little about their numbers or distribution in the state. Professor Ben Call at the University of Minnesota is on a mission to expand our knowledge of these unpopular parasites.
The last time someone did a comprehensive survey of all the different tick species that are found in Minnesota was in the 1940s, and at that time they found that there were 7 species known in the state. Since then, there have been about 15 species of ticks that have been recorded in this state. Since then, there have been several large surveys for deer ticks, but a lot of the other tick species have received little attention, and this project aims to update our current information on tick species present in Minnesota. To do this, we are establishing a community science project which will involve collaborating with wildlife rehabilitation centers, vets, hunters, farmers, and other people that are coming into contact with wildlife as part of their daily activities.
This is a big brown bat. We are in a really unique position to be able to work with Dr. Ben Call on these studies because we have such a large amount of patients and we see so many animals. We get to screen them at intake, we do an exam, and when we find ticks, collect them for Dr. Call. And then, especially with our young animals, with our babies that we bring in, we handle them multiple times a day, and at every time when we handle them, we check again for ticks and collect them. So since 2023, we have collected over 2,100 ticks, spreading at 8 different species.
The study will also rely on sources that encounter ticks a bit less frequently than the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center.
And we'll provide people with tick sampling kits so they can send us ticks in the mail. People are also welcome to email us photos of ticks they find. We're also using our existing iNaturalist project to collect data on tick observations in Minnesota. A major goal of this study is to communicate this information to the public, so we've also established an online dashboard where people can go and look at this data on ticks, and we'll be regularly updating this. Throughout the project, people will be able to go onto this website and find information about the different tick species we found and be able to carry out searches. For example, someone could look at which tick species we found in their county, or they could see when ticks are most active in the state. It's important to be aware of the different species of ticks we have in Minnesota because only certain species can transmit germs to people that make them sick. So knowing what species of tick bit you will give you the information you need to get the right disease testing after a bite if you become sick.
Yeah, when you think about ticks, it's not something a lot of people want to talk about, right? Ticks are kind of gross and yucky, and you don't want to find it on your pets, you don't want to find it on yourself, but they're everywhere, and they're really, really important to keep an eye out because of zoonotic diseases. So for Dr. Call, it's really interesting that there are some of these tick species that are more prevalent now. Ultimately, it is an important study for humans, for pets, and also for our wildlife to know what's out there.
In addition to understanding what ticks are currently in Minnesota, the project aims to monitor species that are knocking on the door of the state.
There are also some ticks that are spreading in the United States. One of these is the Lone Star tick, which people may have heard of, and this is easily recognizable by a white dot on its back, which is where it gets its name, the Lone Star tick. So far, it's not established in Minnesota.
Among the diseases carried by the Lone Star tick is alpha-gal syndrome, which is an allergy to a carbohydrate found in the meat of mammals and some dairy products. The disorder is rapidly rising in the United States. Preliminary findings from a recent study by Virginia Commonwealth University found a 100-fold rise in incident rates among those who were tested from 2013 to 2024. Notably, former Minnesota Vikings Hall of Fame defensive end Jaryd Allen recently announced his battle with alpha-gal.
There's another tick called the Asian longhorn tick, which is causing problems for cattle in the US. And this is an invasive species which has just reached Iowa. So it's important for Minnesotans, if they recognize these tick species, to report them.
There are precautions people can take to reduce the risk of tick bites and tick-borne diseases.
If you're going to be spending time outdoors and you want to reduce the risk of being bitten by ticks, there are a few steps you can take. These include using bug spray. Treated clothing will repel the ticks. Keeping into the middle of trails, not going deep into the brush, although you may not be able to avoid this in some recreational activities. And also check yourself after you've been outside, because most of the tick-borne diseases, the tick needs to be attached for a day or more to be able to transmit the germs. So if you can find ticks and remove them quickly, this greatly reduces the risk of becoming ill from a tick bite. If a person finds a tick on them, they should keep the tick so that someone can identify it. This will give them an idea of the potential diseases they might have transmitted. It's also important that they remove the tick correctly, which is grabbing it to the head and pulling it straight outwards. And you should monitor the bite site. For example, if you see a rash developing, then that's a good time to go and see a doctor.
While most of us would like to limit our exposure to ticks, Dr. Cull is looking for help getting a closer look at many more.
If you work with animals or you're regularly coming across ticks on animals or yourselves, please reach out to us and we'll be happy to accept your tick samples.
For more information on the University of Minnesota Tick Biodiversity Program, you can visit z.umn.edu/mnticks.
Funding for Prairie Sportsman is provided by the Minnesota Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund, as recommended by the Legislative Citizen Commission on Minnesota Resources. By Mark and Margaret Yakel-Julien on behalf of Shalom Hill Farm, a retreat and conference center in a prairie setting near Windham, Minnesota. On the web at shalomhillfarm.org. And by the Friends of Prairie Sportsman. To become a friend of Prairie Sportsman, visit pioneer.org/Prairie Sportsman.